Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Evan Carter stared at the message on his phone for the 10th time that morning. Four simple words that seemed to weigh tons on the glowing screen: "We need to talk today." The sender was an unknown number, but the signature at the end of the short message left no doubt about who was on the other side. Vanessa. The name he'd trained himself not to think about for the past 15 years, ever since that September morning when he'd woken up alone in bed and found only a cold note on the kitchen table. At 51, Evan had built a life that could be described as satisfying, though never quite complete. He was a tenured professor of English literature at a respected university, lived in a tidy apartment with a view of the park, maintained solid friendships with colleagues, and occasionally went out to dinner with one woman or another he met at academic events. Nothing serious. Never anything serious. The wound Vanessa had left had healed unevenly, forming stiff emotional scar tissue that protected him but also held him back. He'd learned to live with it, like someone who learns to walk with a slight limp after an accident. The note she'd left 15 years ago had only 3 lines: "I can't do this anymore. Don't look for me. I'm sorry." No explanation, no reason, no chance to defend himself or understand. Evan spent months going to the police, hired a private investigator, called every friend and relative of hers he knew. Vanessa had simply vanished like smoke. Bank accounts untouched, credit cards unused, phone number disconnected for good. It was as if she'd been erased from existence, leaving only traces of her presence in his life, photos in albums, clothes forgotten in the closet that took him years to finally donate, the lingering scent of her perfume that he could still catch in certain rooms of their old house when the light hit just right. The therapist he'd seen back then suggested Vanessa might have suffered a psychotic episode, a dissociative fugue, or perhaps something worse that no one wanted to say out loud. But there was no body, no evidence of a crime, nothing at all except the void she left behind. With time, Evan sold the house they'd shared, moved cities, accepted the university position, and built a routine that served as armor against the pain. He stopped looking for answers because every search only reopened the wound. And now, 15 years later, those 4 words shattered the fragile piece he'd managed to piece together. Evan replied to the message with fingers that trembled almost imperceptibly: "Where and when?" The response came within seconds, as if she'd been waiting anxiously: "Riverside Cafe, 3 p.m. Please, Evan. It's urgent." He knew the place. A small cafe in a distant industrial area, far from downtown, the kind of place people choose when they don't want to be seen. Evan arrived 20 minutes early, ordered a black coffee he had no intention of drinking, and sat at a corner table where he could watch the door. His heart pounded uncomfortably, and he caught himself mentally rehearsing what he'd say when he saw her. Anger? Indifference? Curiosity? All those emotions swirled together into a toxic cocktail inside his chest. At 3:07, the door opened and Vanessa walked in. Evan needed a few seconds to be sure it was her. The woman crossing the cafe with hesitant steps looked like an aged, worn-out version of the one he'd known. Vanessa had always been vibrantly beautiful, with shiny brown hair and an energy that lit up any room. The woman before him had short, practical gray hair, deep shadows under eyes that seemed to have forgotten how to shine, and a thinness that bordered on unhealthy. She wore a coat too shabby for the still warm autumn weather and carried a worn leather briefcase under her arm. "Evan." Her voice was hoarse, heavy with emotion. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." He didn't stand, didn't offer his hand, didn't give any sign of welcome. He just looked at her with a carefully neutral expression he'd practiced all afternoon. "You've got 15 minutes. After that, I never want to hear from you again for the rest of my life." Vanessa nodded quickly, pulling the chair across from him with visibly shaking hands. She sat down, set the briefcase on the table, and spent a few seconds just looking at him, as if memorizing his face. "You look good. Older, but well. That's good. I thought about you all these years. 14 minutes and 40 seconds. Evan crossed his arms, refusing to make this any easier for her. She took a deep breath, fumbling the briefcase open with clumsy fingers. From inside, she pulled out a stack of documents, medical forms, test results, papers Evan couldn't identify from a distance. I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness, though I know I should. I came because I have no one else to turn to, and because you're the only person in the world who might be able to help. Her voice cracked on the last word. Help with what, exactly? Evan kept his tone cold, though a small part of him was already starting to worry, despite himself. I have a son, Evan. He's 14. Vanessa slid a photo across the table. It showed a thin boy with dark hair, large eyes, and a shy smile. His name is Tyler. And he's dying. The world seemed to slow for a moment. Evan looked at the photo, then at Vanessa, processing the implications of this revelation. 14 years old. She'd been pregnant when she disappeared. This boy, his voice came out rougher than he intended. Are you saying he's my son? I don't know. Tears began streaming down Vanessa's face without her trying to hide them. When I found out I was pregnant, it had already been 3 months. And Evan, I did something terrible. During the last year of our marriage, I had an affair. With your brother-in-law. With James. The name dropped between them like a bomb. James. Evan's younger brother, the freelance photographer who was always traveling, who visited their house often, who Vanessa always insisted was, like a brother, to her too. Memories began rearranging themselves in Evan's mind with painful clarity, the times he'd come home and found James there, the way Vanessa always offered to drive James to the airport, the weekend trips she claimed were with friends but from which she returned with few photos and vague stories. You, and James. Evan repeated the words as if learning a new language. For how long? 8 months. Maybe 9. I'm not exactly sure when it started. It was a gradual, stupid thing, and I hate who I was back then. Vanessa wiped her face with the back of her hand. When I discovered I was pregnant, I panicked. I didn't know whose baby it was. James said I had to disappear, that if you found out, he'd lose his whole family, that your mom would never forgive him. He gave me money, helped me vanish, and I was cowardly enough to go along with it. So you ran away. Left me thinking I'd done something wrong, that I'd somehow failed. Anger began breaking through the barrier Evan had built. You left me searching for you like a fool, talking to police officers, crying in front of strangers, wondering if you were dead in some ditch. I know. And there's no excuse for it. Vanessa pushed more papers across the table, medical exams, diagnosis reports. Tyler has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He needs a bone marrow transplant urgently. I'm not a match. He has no siblings. The chances of finding a compatible donor are slim. Evan looked at the documents without really seeing them. His mind raced, connecting dots, building and dismantling possibilities. And you think I might be a match? That's why you came back. There's a chance. Vanessa leaned forward, desperate. If he's your son, you have a 50% chance of being a viable donor. Please, Evan. I know I have no right to ask for anything, I know you should hate me, and I'd understand if you walked out right now. But he's just a kid. He's not to blame for my horrible choices. Evan sat in silence for a long moment, looking at the boy's photo. Did Tyler have his eyes? Maybe. Or maybe he had James's eyes. It was impossible to tell just by looking. And James? Did you go to him first? Vanessa's gaze dropped. James. James cut contact with me soon after Tyler was born. Said it had all been a mistake, that he had his own family now to worry about. I tried to find him a few times over the years, but he changed his number, moved cities. I don't know where he is. He's living 2 hours from here, married to a dentist, with 2 kids. Evan said the words without emotion. We haven't spoken in 13 years, not since Mom died and he didn't show up for the funeral. But I know where he is. Vanessa closed her eyes for a moment. I didn't know. About your mom. I'm so sorry. Don't be. Evan stood up, picking up the medical papers from the table. I'll take the test. Not for you, but because you're right, that kid isn't to blame for the choices the adults around him made. But let's be clear, Vanessa, this doesn't change anything between us. When this is all over, you disappear from my life again. This time, for good. The test results took 3 days. 3 days during which Evan barely slept, barely ate, barely managed to give his lectures with the attention they required. He caught himself staring at Tyler's photo repeatedly, searching the boy's face for traces of himself, wanting to find them and simultaneously dreading that he might. Having a son he didn't know, raised away from him because of Vanessa's lies, was a thought that swung between devastating and strangely hopeful. On the morning of the 3rd day, Evan was in the doctor's office when he received the results. Dr. Morrison, a middle-aged man with round glasses and a perpetually gentle expression, placed the papers carefully on the table between them. Mr. Carter, the results show you are not genetically compatible with Tyler as a bone marrow donor. The HLA marker match falls below the required threshold. Evan looked at the numbers and charts without really comprehending them, but he understood the key implication. So I'm not his father. Correct. Based on this analysis, I can state with over 99% certainty that you share no biological parental relationship with the child. Relief came first. He wouldn't have to deal with the emotional complexity of discovering he had a teenage son. But right behind it came another wave of feeling, renewed anger. Vanessa had known. She must have known. A woman doesn't hide a pregnancy, doesn't flee her husband, doesn't live 15 years in secret unless she's sure the child isn't his. She'd come back knowing he likely wasn't the father, yet still lied, or at least omitted, hoping his compassion would be enough. For the next 2 days, Evan did something he hadn't done in 15 years, he searched for James. It wasn't hard. His brother maintained a professional website with a business address, phone number, and even photos of his happy family, the blonde, smiling wife, 2 little boys playing in the yard. No trace of guilt, no sign of remorse. James had moved on as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't destroyed a marriage, as if he didn't have a sick child somewhere. The call was answered on the 3rd try. Hello? James's voice sounded just as Evan remembered, casual, carefree. Hi, James. It's Evan. The silence on the other end lasted 5 full seconds. Evan. Wow. Didn't expect, it's been a while, huh? 15 years since you slept with my wife and convinced her to disappear with your son. Yeah, quite a while. Evan kept his voice calm, almost conversational. Another silence, longer this time. When James spoke again, the casualness had vanished. How did you find out? Vanessa came back. Tyler has leukemia. She went to me hoping I was the father and could donate bone marrow. Evan paused. But I'm not. You are. Listen, Evan, that was a long time ago. I was young and stupid, Anne. You're 38, James. You weren't a kid. You were an adult who made a conscious choice to betray your brother and then abandon a pregnant woman because it was inconvenient. Anger started seeping through Evan's calm. And now you've got a 14-year-old son dying, and you didn't even know he existed because you ran away from the situation. Vanessa agreed. She said it was better this way, that she'd handle everything herself. James's defensiveness was almost palpable through the phone. And you were happy to believe it because it freed you from any responsibility. Evan took a deep breath. You're going to get tested for compatibility. And if you're a match, you're going to donate bone marrow to Tyler. I have a family, Evan. A wife, kids. I can't just. I don't care what you think you can or can't do. You're going to do it because it's the right thing. And because if you don't, I'll make sure your wife, your kids, your clients, everyone in your perfect little life, knows exactly what kind of man you are. The threat was clear, without embellishment. James took the test. He was a match. Surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later. During that time, Evan had one final meeting with Vanessa on a park bench near the hospital where Tyler was admitted. She looked even more fragile than she had at the cafe, the weight of the situation clearly taking its toll. James agreed to donate. She said it like a question, as if she still couldn't believe it. He didn't have a choice. Evan kept his physical distance, standing while she remained seated. But that's not why I'm here. I came to clear a few things up. Vanessa looked up at him, expectant and anxious. You knew Tyler wasn't my son. You knew when you ran, you knew when you came back. That's why you disappeared. You couldn't look me in the eye every day knowing you were carrying my brother's child. And you came back now betting that even if I wasn't the father, I'd be compassionate enough to help. Evan crossed his arms. Am I right? Vanessa lowered her head, silent tears falling onto her clasped hands in her lap. I suspected. I wasn't absolutely certain, but I suspected. And yes, I came back hoping you'd be a better man than I was a woman. You've used my decency against me twice, Vanessa. Once when you left me with all the doubts and guilt. Again when you came back knowing I'd probably do anything to save an innocent child, even if he wasn't mine. Evan crouched down to her eye level. Tyler's going to be okay. James will donate the marrow, and the doctors are optimistic about his recovery. But when all this is over, I want you to do something for me. Anything. Her voice came out as a desperate whisper. Tell Tyler the truth. When he's old enough, strong enough, tell him about James, about me, about the choices you made. He deserves to know where he came from, even if the story is painful. And he deserves the chance to meet his biological father, if he wants to. Evan straightened up. That's the only good thing you can do now, give him the truth you denied me. The surgery was a success. Evan learned this through a brief text from Vanessa 2 weeks later. Tyler's responding well. Prognosis is excellent. Thank you for everything. He didn't reply. He blocked her number, blocked James's number, and did what he should have done 15 years earlier. He truly moved on. 6 months later, Evan was in his university office grading essays when he heard a hesitant knock at the door. He looked up and saw a thin boy around 14 standing in the hallway, wearing a cap that couldn't quite hide the regrowing hair on his head. Tyler. Professor Carter? The boy had a soft, nervous voice. My mom said I could, that maybe you'd want. I don't know if I should be here. Evan slowly set his pen down and studied the boy's face. Now that he knew what to look for, he could see James there, the jawline, the shape of the ears. But there was something of Vanessa too, and something uniquely Tyler. Come in. Close the door. Tyler obeyed, standing near the entrance with his hands in his pockets, clearly unsure what to do. My mom told me everything. About you, about my real dad, about everything. I just wanted to say thank you. For making my dad help me. He said it was you who made him take the test. It wasn't for you. Evan said the words without cruelty, just honesty. It was because it was the right thing to do, no matter how I felt about the whole situation. I know. Tyler took a step forward. But still, thank you. I'd be dead if it wasn't for you. And I know I have no right to ask for anything else, but I just wanted to meet you. To know what the man my mom loved before she ruined everything was like. Evan looked at the boy for a long moment, seeing not a symbol of betrayal, but just a kid trying to understand his place in the world. A kid who hadn't chosen any of this, who hadn't asked to be born into lies and secrets. "Sit down. We've got a lot to talk about." They talked for 2 hours that afternoon. Tyler told him about growing up with only his mom, the financial struggles, finding out he was sick and fearing he'd die without knowing half his story. Evan told him about his marriage to Vanessa, the years spent trying to understand what went wrong, rebuilding a life after devastation. He didn't offer forgiveness, didn't pretend they could have a father-son relationship. But he offered something perhaps more valuable: truth. When Tyler left, Evan sat alone in his office watching the sun set through the window. He thought about Vanessa, about James, about all the selfish choices that led to so much suffering. He thought about Tyler, trying to piece together his identity from scattered, hidden fragments. And he thought about himself, not as a victim, not as a hero, just as a man who'd done what he could with an impossible situation. Forgiveness, Evan decided, was too grand and generous a word for what he felt. He didn't forgive Vanessa for the betrayal, the lies, the years of stolen peace. He didn't forgive James for his cowardice, for how easily he'd shattered blood ties. But he wouldn't carry that weight like a cross anymore. He'd done his part, helped save a life, offered clarity to a confused kid. That would have to be enough. Months turned into years. Tyler occasionally sent short messages, updates on his health, school, life. Evan responded with polite distance, never encouraging more, never fully closing the door. James tried reaching out once, a long email full of apologies and justifications. Evan deleted it without replying. Vanessa never tried contacting him again. On a winter night, 2 years after that meeting at the cafe, Evan was having dinner with a colleague, Rebecca, a history professor, divorced, with a sharp sense of humor and zero tolerance for drama. She was telling a funny story about a student when she stopped mid-sentence. "You okay? You seem distant." Evan realized he was smiling, a genuine, unforced smile. "I'm great, actually. Just thinking how strange life is sometimes. How the worst things can turn you into a better person, even when you don't realize you're changing." Too deep for a Thursday night. Rebecca raised her wine glass. "But I'll take it. To the strange things that make us who we are. To the strange things." Evan repeated, clinking his glass against hers. That night, walking back to his apartment under a star-filled sky, Evan thought about all the versions of himself he'd been. The devastated man who woke up alone 15 years ago. The angry man who discovered the betrayal late. The man who chose to help even without obligation. And now, this man, older, wearier, but more complete in ways he couldn't quite explain. Vanessa's message was still saved somewhere in his phone archives. "We need to talk today." For words that reopened old wounds but also, in a twisted way, finally let them heal properly. Not with forgiveness, not with reconciliation, but with understanding. And sometimes, Evan reflected as he climbed the stairs to his building, understanding was enough. It was possible to live without perfect answers, without cinematic closure, without the satisfaction of seeing clear justice done. He'd survived the worst kind of betrayal twice, once when Vanessa left, again when she came back. And yet, here he was, breathing, living, even occasionally happy. This wasn't forgiveness. It was something different, something harder and more valuable. It was refusing to let other people's bad choices permanently define who he was. It was choosing, every day, to be better than those who'd hurt him. In the end, Evan realized, there was no clear moral to the story, no clean lesson to be drawn. Just imperfect people making imperfect choices and living with the consequences. Vanessa would have to live knowing her lies almost cost her son his life. James would have to live knowing he abandoned a child and only did the right thing when forced. Tyler would have to live piecing together his identity from painful fragments. And Evan? Evan would have to live knowing he'd done what he could with an impossible situation, and that sometimes, that had to be enough. And strangely, it was. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.